Hello React Native developers, what is going on? Welcome to Can It Be Done in React Native? This week we scroll through our best tunes. Hello guys, I hope you are well. William here, recording from beautiful Zurich, Switzerland. In this week's episode, we are looking at the Spotify scrollable header. So you see you can scroll in one direction or the other. Very smooth. The shuffle play button floats to the top position, and you have this very nice transition with the header from this max size to this min size. I'm very excited about this episode for two reasons. The first reason is that this is one of the most requested example that I get. So I'm glad to finally tackle it. So we did, I think that was the last episode was App Store App of the Day was also one of the most requested. And so with this one now, we also tackle one of the most requested episodes. So that's very cool. And the second reason I'm very excited about this example is because these collapsible scrollable headers are, I think, very important to give a really nice finish to your app. I mean, it makes your app looks very professional. And it's about time, I think, we tackle these examples on the channel and that we become experts in such techniques. So last episode, I think, was a shared transition with the Apple Store App of the Day. So again, I think also that shared transitions need to become a commodity in React Native, and as well as building these beautiful scrollable headers. I looked at a couple of examples from real-world apps. So I found this one, which I find to be pretty cool. There are some others which you would build using different techniques. And hopefully we'll get to do more examples in the future. But this is the one we're doing today. And if you have examples of interesting examples of scrollable headers you would like me to look at, please send me an email, or you can also reach me on Twitter. So how would we do this in React Native? So obviously here we have a scroll view, right? We're scrolling through a list of items. And I would say there are 1, 2, 3 layers. So the first layer is this background image, which is animated on scale. On the scale property according to the scroll event. So the second layer is on top of it is a scroll view. The scroll view has the first item in the first component in the scroll view is a view that a linear gradient. So that's why we see the image through the view, but you see also this linear gradient that goes from transparent to black. And then you have the list of items. And when we scroll, we also animate the opacity of the linear gradient to go to black. And then we have the list of items. The third, did I say 3 layers? I think there is 4. But the third layer is on top of it. So here I'm going from bottom to top. So the image, on top of it we have the scroll view. On top of it we have two elements which are on the same level. So the first one is the header you see on the top. You see with the arrow and the following button, which has an opacity of 0 and then goes to 1, and also we have some opacity animation on the text. You can see here The background is already black, but the text not quite yet. So that's our third layer. And the fourth layer is, of course, this shuffle play button, which is perfectly synchronized with the Y event of the scroll view. But until a certain point, then it has how do you say? It's clamped to a certain value on the top position. So nothing. You see, I think if you can decompose this problem in really clear separate layers, here we have 4 layers, each on top of each other, and we have the scroll view which will drive the animation. So we're going to declare a Y animation value which we're going to pass to all these components because they are all animated in one way or the other, and the scroll view will drive this animation value. So nothing too complex. It's a really cool example to look at, and not, I think, all the collapsible scrollable headers that you see on real world apps cannot necessarily be implemented with this particular technique, but hopefully we'll get also to look at some other examples. But what do you guys think? Can it be done in React Native? Let's have a look. And before we get started, 2 things. First of all, if you would like to support this channel and you like the show, you can buy me a coffee and I will give you access to the private GitHub repository where I tinker with all these examples, and I will make sure to treat your requests in priority. And if you have a new React Native project coming up, you can check out React Native Elements. It's a premium starter kit for React Native. It works very well on both iOS and Android. It's 80% of what you need when starting a new React Native project. And so from boilerplate navigation, static analysis, and tons of beautiful UI components, this is what I use for every of my new React Native projects. So if you have a new project coming up, I recommend you check it out. Links are in the video description. Alright guys, let's get started. Here I created a boilerplate project which you can download in case you want to follow along with this example. I used Expo Init to create this project, and I used SDK 33, super exciting. It's an incredible release. I didn't get time to play with React Native Web yet, but what I can tell you is that the new TypeScript support is absolutely incredible. And of course, we can use hooks. So here I have some data to display on the view, which contains the album cover. And here, for instance, I'm using use effect to load the album cover. I'm showing the splash screen while it's loading. Once it's loaded, I have the album component, which contains the 4 layers that we mentioned before. Cover, which is the image you see here at the background. Content, which is the scroll view, which is going to drive the animation. Header, which is this black header, and we're going to play with the opacity of the header. By default, it's going to be transparent, and then it's going to get to the opacity of 1, as well as a slight delay with the text. And we have the shuffle play button, which we need to synchronize with the scroll view. And maybe I'm going to start with, let's start we need something to drive the animation value. So I'm going to create a Y animation value from, okay. So import animated from React Native reanimated. And I think that we're going to need this Y value in every component. So I'm going to just pass it as parameter. And if we go in content, so we have Y, which we can declare here as an animated value of number. Okay, perfect. And we can use, we can assign this value to the onScroll event. And I have a boilerplate function from redash for onScroll, so I can just do onScroll like this. No, okay. Perfect. So now we should have the Y animation value being driven by the scroll view. So let's go through these 4 components one by one and do the proper animations. So let's go to the album cover. When we, this means that I forgot something, which is here animated.scrollView. And let's go back to the cover component. So yeah, here I have 2 things to animate: the scale of the image and the opacity. So we're gonna start with the scale, and I'm gonna need, okay, so here I'm having Y again as animated value of number. And we're gonna need to use interpolate and maybe extrapolate as well from animated. So we get Y as a property. So let's interpolate. So we interpolate Y. Input range goes from, let's say, minus, I don't know, -8 of the screen to 0. We output range goes, let's just put some random value, see how it feels, 6 to 1. And of course we need to at least extrapolate on the right side. So extrapolate clamp. Okay. And we need to define height. 8 height. 8. No, height, of course. What am I? 8 is the number. Oh my god. Up. Height. And the number is 8. Okay. Things I'm learning while doing these examples. So we can have an animated view, assign it here, transform scale, perfect. And here on top of the image I have a black mask, and we're going to animate also the opacity. So if I go back here to the example, you see it's kind of a bit dark, goes a bit clearer, goes darker. So let's go back here. We're gonna interpolate Y, extrapolate clamp. So from let's say again -64, we're gonna go to 0. Default is gonna be 0.2, and once we are at header delta, the mask has full opacity, so everything is dark. And just to show you quickly, if I go in model, so here I define the min header height, which is status bar 8 plus 64, max header height, which is relative to the height of the screen. So I could have actually used this constant here because it's relative to the height of the screen. Could do max header height and maybe 4, 6. Yeah, let's try that. So I don't have to use this here. And then I have header delta, which is the scroll, the number of pixels that need to be scrolled to go from the max delta height to the min delta height. So let's have a look. Oops, I'm locked in. Yes, sorry about that. And here, of course, it needs to be animated view as well. Should be good now. So we do have like the parallax effect, and the opacity seems to be changing as well. So that looks good. Now let's go into content. So in content, if we go back here, what do we animate in content? So we have, you see look at the bottom gradient on the cover. So its height goes down the more I scroll. You see, it goes up, goes up. So we need to animate that, as well as the opacity of the name of the artist. At 0, it's full opacity. I go down, it goes to 0. And I go up, goes to 0 as well. So let's animate these things. So I'm gonna need, again, I guess, interpolate and some extrapolate as well from animated. Okay, so the height. So we interpolate Y. So we go from 0, so minus max header height to 0, and output range. So when we are scrolled at minus max header height, the height of the linear gradient is 0, and if not, it's max header height, which is, you see it on the screen, right? This size here. Oh, actually, sorry about that. I got confused. Okay. So this one should be good. We need to extrapolate clamp. And so I'm gonna need animated here. Now we need also to deal with the opacity of the text title here. So I can just add animated text, opacity, which we interpolate on Y as well. And we are gonna go from, so we go from, so at 0 it's gonna be 1. When we scroll down to a certain position, goes to 0, and goes to 0 when we scroll to the top as well. And here I'm gonna pick these two values, see how it looks. But actually, to see how it looks, I think we're gonna need to, so here, perfect. And here I cannot see it because of the header, so let's animate the opacity of the header, which is our third component. So we have two components here, the black background view, and the text, and we know based on the Spotify example, they both need to be separately animated. So let's do that. We also get Y as a parameter, which is a value of number. And now let's interpolate. So we have opacity, when we start to get close to header, we have almost scroll header delta pixels, we start to animate the opacity. So I'm going to do header delta minus 16. At header delta, the header needs to be visible. So I'm going to do output range. We go from 0 to 1 and we need to extrapolate and I need to import these guys from reanimated. Pass the value as parameter. And we need to do the same with the text opacity, which as we've seen in the example, has slight delay. So I'm going to create text opacity, which goes, let's say, from header delta to header delta plus 4. Or maybe plus 2, and maybe we start to let's do plus 2, and I can pass it as parameter here as well. Up. All right. Doesn't look too bad, I think. Maybe I would do here -4. Let's see if it's better. I would even do something like -8, -4. Yeah, much better. All right, so now we need to animate our last element, which is this shuffle play button. And I mean, the first thing we can, okay, let's add a transform, so a translate Y. And it needs to be an animated view, of course. And let's maybe just assign translate Y to Y, just see how it looks. Okay, so you see here it needs to be multiplied by -1. And I need to import multiply from animated. And we're gonna need to add basically a min somewhere to block. So here that looks great, but you see here it continues scrolling, but wait a minute. So we're gonna need to add some min, but we need to fix this one, which I think, let's try max header 8. See how it looks. Max header 8 minus, oh, that looks good actually. No, minus the height of the button, because we wanted really to have it in between, the height of the button divided by 2. Yeah, that looks much better. But now you see it goes through, and we need to block this value, so we're gonna make sure that we don't go below header delta. And I need to import min, sorry about that. So it looks pretty good. I mean, if we go back to the original example, this is pretty similar. But, and you see here, so if you look at the text, the way it cuts in the middle perfectly, so exactly like in the example. So that looks pretty good, but can you guys see, you see this, how the green button is shaking? So basically it's not synchronizing properly on iOS. On Android it works great. So that's the first time I do some React Native and you have something that works, that is supposed to work, that works on Android and that doesn't work on iOS. It's usually the other way around. It's supposed to work. It works great on iOS. It never works on Android. I've done React Native since more than 2 years, and it's the very first time this happens to me. So I made some research, and there is actually a bug entry for this in the React Native project, which has been fixed, which is planned to be shipped in 0.6. And apparently also in the patch version of 0.59. But of course, it would be nice to have for us to have a workaround for this. In the meantime, if we cannot use these versions of React Native, and I think we can find a pretty cool workaround. And it's a workaround I'm willing to make, because I want to use a technique which I'm gonna need to reuse in other future examples, whether I have to, regardless of the fact that there is this bug on the scroll view. So I think it can be good to try this technique. So how can we work around this bug, this regression on iOS? We can put the shuffle play button in the scroll view. So here it will move. Of course, it will be synchronized with the scroll view. And then once we reach a certain value, we make the button disappear. And then we have of course this button absolutely positioned, which the opacity appears. So we have two button. We will have two shuffle play button, but we will play with an opacity animation value, which will make it look like there is only one button. So let's try. I hope it works. If it works, it's a technique that can be very useful for other animations that we can try in next videos. So let's have a look. So I'm gonna add a shuffle play button in the content. So here I have the tracks. So I'm gonna add a shuffle play button. And what we need, so I need to import it here somehow. We need to make, so this button needs to appear on top, so at max header, min header height minus, no, just min header height actually. So we are not going to be able to have it in between, because that would break the effect exactly. So that's good. And now we just need to animate the opacity. So we're going to add opacity value. So we're going to add a condition on Y. So we're scrolling till so till the delta value. So if y is greater or equal than header delta, opacity is 1. If not, it's 0. Let's have a look. Minus, so let's minus half of the button 8. Plus, sorry, my delta. Oh, that actually makes sense. I should, yeah, perfect. But now we need, yeah, no, so that makes sense because of course it's delta, yeah, it's delta 8 plus, yeah, half of the button 8. This one, because that's exactly the position we are here at 0. And then, so the last step now is to make the other one disappear. So we go into content and we're gonna also wrap it into an animated view which has a opacity of button opacity and so what is our condition here? So we basically, I mean, take the, let me just copy and invert it, and if it works, we can pass it as parameter. So let's just try quickly. No, I mean, that doesn't make sense, sorry about that. So we have opacity, and I'm gonna pass it here as btn opacity. And if I go into content, so here opacity is gonna be so if btn opacity equals 1, we are at 0 or we are at 1. And yeah, perfect. All right, so that looks pretty good. What I would do is maybe have the original, I'm not sure how easy it would be, but to have some sort of a platform flag, to have the original animation as we built it, to run on Android, and then to run this one on iOS. And then we can also disable it easily once we run a version of React Native which has this bug fixed. I think it's just very funny that it's the first time we have something not working on Android, not working on iOS. I'm pretty actually happy about this workaround of having two identical elements and make it look like as if there is only one by playing with the opacity of these elements. We're going to use it to do some, I think, really cool things in future videos. So yeah, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this example. I'm looking forward to talk to you guys soon, and in the meantime, happy hacking.